Good evening. On behalf of the commissioners and staff, I would like to welcome you to the July 26th City of Roseville Public Utilities Commission meeting. This 7-member commission is responsible for studying, advising the City Council regarding all utilities owned or operated by the city, including electric, water, wastewater, and solid waste. The Public Utilities Commission advises the City Council regarding planning, rates, public information, cable television franchises, and other matters relating to such enterprises, and may also hear citizen complaints as to operational rates. The Public Utilities Commission also advises the City Council regarding the activities of such joint power agencies as the city may be a member of, or which relate to such utility enterprises. At this time, I'd like to ask that everyone please put your electronic devices on silent. Pam, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Bilski, absent. Commissioner DeLacy.
Here.
Commissioner DeMarkey.
Here.
Commissioner Granger.
Here.
Commissioner Knox. Commissioner Maish.
Here.
And Chair Webb.
Present.
Can we have the roll reflect that Commissioner Bielski is now in attendance? Thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Plenty of free parking.
That was a problem.
So tonight there's a street fair here in Roseville, which I guess this is the last one. So it would be a good evening to come down and see the last hurrah for this. So Commissioner Knox, would you please call lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 4 on our agenda tonight is public comments. This item is for anyone who would like to address the commission on any item that's not on tonight's agenda. When addressing the commission, please state your first and last name for the record. Not seeing any public comment, I'd like to move to the next item on our agenda, which is approval of the minutes. This would be the June 28th, 2022 meeting minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? We've approved the minutes. The next item on our agenda is the requests and presentations. The first item here is the selection of a chair and vice chair. In accordance with the city's boards and commissions administrative standards, the chair and vice chair shall be elected annually by the commission. The selected chair and vice chair will assume their positions at the next regular meeting in August. Senior Deputy City Attorney, would you please walk us through the process?
Sure. So we're going to take the chair and the vice chair selection separately. So the first one we'll start with is the chair, and what I'll do is I'll ask if anyone, or I guess the chair will ask if anyone is interested in being the chair for our next session. And after we have everyone that we know that is interested, we'll ask if anyone wants to nominate any other commissioners. And then after that, we will take any public comment, and then we'll move into whether or not anyone wants to make a motion to select a certain commissioner as the chair. Then we'll have a second of the motion, and then we'll vote on it, and then repeat the whole process for vice chair. Any questions? Make sense? Okay.
So I'd like to start with who is interested in being chair of this group. Commissioner Knox? Is there anyone else who is interested? Can we have a motion to...
Hang on, does anyone want to nominate another
anyone?
commissioner for the chair?
I will nominate him for chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And are there any other people who are interested or would like to make a nomination? Okay, at this time...
Let's do public comment, but I know that there's...
Let's do the public comment. Does anyone like to make a public comment on this appointment of chair for the Public Utilities Commission? Hearing no public comment, I'd like to move toward voting for this.
Yeah, so does anyone want to make a motion to select Commissioner Knox as the chair for the next session?
I'll make a motion.
And second.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let's have a vote. Who would like to approve Commissioner Knox as our president, as our chair? Any opposed or abstentions? You've got it.
Okay, great. Congratulations. And then now we'll move on to the vice chair. So does anyone have an interest in becoming vice chair?
I do. Anyone else? Do we have any nominations or comments from the commission? Do we have any comments or public comment from our public? Not hearing any public comment, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the appointment of Commissioner Webb to the vice chair.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Commissioner Webb.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please, or abstentions, please speak. All right, we have a new vice chair.
All right,
All right, thank you, Joe.
congratulations to both of you.
All right. Item number 6 tonight is the environmental utilities monthly update. Tonight we get to hear from our environmental utilities assistant director, Sean Bigley, and he will be summarizing a monthly status for environmental activities.
Well, thank you, Chair Webb and members of the Public Utilities Commission. So actually tonight what I want to do for the director's update is go ahead and give you guys an update on hydrology, given the current state of the drought and just generally the water system. So just a really brief update just to give you a sense of where things stand. So as all of you are probably quite aware of, Folsom Reservoir is a source of water for the city of Roseville. We have a water service contract that we've had in place since 1971. And in part that basically the water supply that we're talking about from Folsom Reservoir is about 32,000 acre feet of water. The reservoir served us very well for many years. In addition, we also have a supply from Placer County Water Agency through their Middle Fork project for eventually up to 30,000 acre feet of water. And so what's interesting about both of those supplies is that both of those supplies are essentially either brought through the intake at Folsom Reservoir, and in the case of the Middle Fork project water, that Middle Fork project water is actually released upstream, and it's actually wheeled through Folsom Reservoir and brought through that similar intake. So what's really important and what we keep track of for obvious reasons is kind of where Folsom Reservoir is with respect to lake level and really tracking that against where that stands relative to water supply and also where it stands relative to the intake structure. So it's really important for the city. So briefly, I just wanted to kind of give you this graph that just gives you a sense of where we're at. And there's several lines that I just want to kind of point out that are important. So the very top line with the triangles, that's 1982, 1983. That's the fill pattern. So you'll see that the total volume of water is on the left-hand side, and Folsom Reservoir has a capacity of about 977,000 acre feet. And then you can see that on the bottom, there's the time axis, essentially, that shows kind of the water year and how it plays out. So again, that top line with the triangles, that's 82, 83. You'll see that red sort of not even a curved line, it's actually just a linear line. That's actually the flood control curve, and that's essentially the space that Folsom Reservoir has to basically adhere to based on federal law, because one of the primary purposes of the reservoir is for flood control, especially for downstream, given the history of flooding in this area. And then the basically the shaded area, what that is actually sort of what an average year looks like in terms of just sort of the fill and drop in the reservoir. And so with respect to where we're at right now, You'll see there's a yellow line there. You can barely see it in the graph, but that's essentially where we were last year in terms of the reservoir and what was going on. And then the red line with the triangles is actually a really severe year. That's 76, 77. So one of the lowest points in the reservoir at that time. So the line that you see right there, you'll see there's a very bolded blue line up there, and you'll see that it roughly is following the sort of average curve line. You'll see it terminates basically at about this point in time. So roughly right now, we're looking at a reservoir that's about 64% capacity, and that's based on historical average, we're about 96% of historical average. So generally speaking, the reservoir is in relatively good shape, but one of the caveats I just want to indicate, and you'll start to see this play out over several months, is that, and we'll talk about kind of the system and where the system is where Folsom Reservoir sits relative to other reservoirs in the system. And then I just want to note sort of, you'll see here the inflow at 1,380 cubic feet per second. And outflow right now is relatively high at 4,500 cubic feet per second, and I'll explain why. So we can go to the next slide, please. So this is just a portion of the system condition map that we track in terms of reservoirs. I would want to point out really kind of three key reservoirs that are significant. So you'll see, of course, Folsom Reservoir there on the right-hand side, middle side of the graphic here. And then I'll point you to Oroville, which is part of the State Water Project system. And then Shasta Reservoir, which is part of the Central Valley Project system. And again, Folsom Reservoir is also part of the Central Valley Project system. So really kind of a significant thing to state in terms of hydrology this year is that the hydrology that we experience has been very uneven throughout the state. So within our watershed, we were actually very lucky to have a pretty normal, if not above normal, situation relative to snow and precipitation within our watershed. And so as you can see, based on the current sort of comparison, Folsom, again, is in relatively good shape. Where there has been significant issues, and this is really a result of poor hydrology, is in the north part of the state, where you look at Shasta Reservoir. Essentially, Shasta Reservoir is right now about 37% capacity, and it's about 53% of what it historically has been in the past. And then generally, Oroville's kind of in the middle, not doing great in terms of overarching supply right now. They're about 62% of historical average. So why is this important? So the fact of the matter is, relative to Folsom Reservoir, it is part of the Central Valley Project system. It's an integrated system. It's operated in an integrated way between the Bureau of Reclamation and the state of California. And so just one of the things that I wanted to point out that we will definitely start to see over the coming months is because the other reservoirs are at a lower level, by default, operationally, Reclamation will be working Folsom Reservoir relatively hard. And Folsom Reservoir is used for multiple purposes. In a year like this, maybe not so much for flood control purposes, but there is also legal obligations relative to conditions in the Bay Delta and other requirements that Reclamation has to adhere to. So in years like this where they're having salinity issues in the Bay Delta and they have to flush water out to prevent salt water infringing upon potential water supply intakes in the Bay Delta, as well as requirements relative to temperature for not only the American River, but other water quality concerns downstream. Typically what we see in these circumstances like this is you'll see Folsom Reservoir being operated pretty aggressively. So anyways, I just wanted to lay that out. Certainly, folks see the reservoir where it's at right now, and it looks like it's in pretty good shape. But based on what we're seeing and what we're hearing from Reclamation, we should expect that lake level to drop rather significantly in the next several months relative to current conditions. And so that's just a really important thing for us to keep in mind too, is that as we look at these back-to-back years of drought, it just underscores the need to be preparing for the coming year, especially if we are in a condition where we have a similar, very dry winter ahead. So that'll definitely inform in the next couple of months how we're going to be preparing for the following year, just to make sure we reduce risk for Roseville. So with that, that's my presentation on this particular item, and I just wanted to open that up for any questions you might have.
Do any commissioners have any questions for staff at this time?
I have one. Of course, Southern California is in terrible shape
Yeah.
with water there, and they've relied on Mead Lake a lot, and it's pretty low right now, historically low. Will there be any legal pressure on Folsom or other reservoirs in this area to supply even more water to Southern California, which will jeopardize our situation?
Well, I mean, one of the things that, to keep in mind is the, situation on the Colorado River has been years in the making. They've seen deterioration on that river with respect to just general hydrology results. And obviously, both Powell and Meade have been dropping over time. That is certainly a consideration that, the federal and state agencies are looking at very closely. Reclamation, I would say right now, is really keenly focused on that situation in the Colorado River. In terms of, again, if we're talking about an integrated system, there could conceivably be pressure for Northern California reservoirs to assist. But the problem is that there's not a lot of room there to assist in that particular circumstance when you also have other pressures such as Bay Delta and some other aspects as well. So, but certainly, yes, that could be something that plays out over time.
Any other questions? Yes?
What's the status on the Sites Reservoir?
So Sites Reservoir, they are currently in the process of their environmental process. So they're in the midst of working on their EIR document. They're also in a phase right now where they're really focused in on getting all the necessary permitting for the reservoir. They've actually had some relatively good news recently in terms of just some federal funding that's coming their way. They've been working on getting WIFIA financing lined up through the US EPA. They were also able to secure some appropriations at the federal level for the reservoir. So they've actually seen a fair amount of investment that's been occurring in terms of getting the reservoir going. On the schedule right now, as I last saw it, they're still shooting for roughly a completion date of probably like 2030 or kind of in the early 2030 range in terms of when they anticipate to have the reservoir done. But it's a big project with a lot of risk, and a lot of things can happen in between. But I would just say, generally speaking, I think the site's JPA, Joint Powers Authority, has really caught their stride. They have a new general manager and a new team, and I think they're making some really significant progress. So feeling pretty, I would characterize as many people are feeling very bullish about Sites Reservoir right now, but it's still going to take some time to get there. Yeah.
Any questions here? Yes, please. Yeah.
Go ahead. Hi, Sean.
Hi, Heiner.
The chart on Folsom Reservoir, do we have a target for reservoir levels at the October 1st?
So, yes. So typically what we're shooting for is the target that I think ultimately we'd like to see is roughly 300,000 acre feet. The last target I think we're at is about 250,000 acre feet is sort of the ideal target for us during the fall timeframe, and that's part of the modified flow management standard and really kind of trying to set that forward.
Has the Bureau indicated where they think that they'll be by October 1st? That's what I really want.
So October 1st, the last projection I saw, it looks like they were roughly about that.
250?
About 250 or so. And that's based on a 90% exceedance, just for context. So, but the good news on that is that there has been some progress with reclamation the past couple of years. There's it's an MOU. I would probably characterize as a non-binding MOU where they have committed to really trying to adhere to that. And what we've seen with operations at the reservoir with sort of the current set of staff is they've actually they've actually worked towards that in good faith effort. So it's been the past couple of years has been we've been, I think, generally pleased with how Reclamation has been working with us in the fashion they have.
Good.
Yeah.
Good news.
Yep.
I read the GIM on the RWA meeting that you wrote, and there are a couple of bills that, if you don't mind, I'd like to just mention and talk
Sure.
about. So SB 1157 by Hertzberg, he proposed to lower the indoor water use. With what's happening on the Colorado, what I've read is that Southern California may have to cut 35% this year. They're going to get a 25% reduction on the Colorado River water, and of course, Oroville's already low. And so this seems like a grab for water. Political cover for the locals down there because, Hertzberg can make it a statewide issue. We don't have this problem. They're in terrible shape, and, anything we can do to help them, but ending up with a mandate for us, for everybody, whether you have a water supply problem or not, to lower your indoor water use standards is going to be a difficult pill to swallow if we have to. And so is Roseville staff and the RWA community, are they being aggressive about opposing this legislation?
Yeah, and Noelle will get into that in her presentation, but we've been very engaged in that discussion. I think the frustration in the water community is based on so what we saw in terms of mandated requirements under SB 606 and 1168, AB 1168. I think we generally feel like it's moving the goalposts when we're in the midst of trying to implement legislation that has already become law. And so, yeah, it's very, very concerning, Einer. And I would also say that just as a practical matter, when you talk about 42 gallons per capita per day, as far as an indoor standard, it's going to be very difficult for people to actually achieve that, right? And so the other challenge, of course, is that when it comes down to it, if that becomes law, ultimately the districts and the municipalities are going to be on the hook for that from an enforcement standpoint. And so we're definitely highly engaged in that discussion. We have been for some time, and we're working very hard to try to oppose the bill and hopefully kill it at this point.
The other one was a bill to require the water board to include climate in the water rights. So PCWA is currently in a water rights extension,
right? And
that's a supply for us in Roseville,
right?
And so we got a lot of skin in the game.
Yep.
And if they put climate in here, I mean, what do you need water for? Well, for new houses. Oh, they're going to have heating and cooling, and they're going to drive, and
right.
This is going to be terrible for the climate, right? How's anyone going to succeed in getting water rights? And there's a support position by RWA on this?
I'll
That's just what it says here.
Okay. Go ahead.
I will have to get back to you on that one. That is not one that is kind of bubbled up at this point as the legislature went into recess. There's a couple of bills, 1157 and SB 222, that I'm going to be sharing this evening that have really taken the air out of the room at the moment. And so I can get back to you with information on that and the reasoning
This
behind.
was SB 1205, so anyway, those two,
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and just if I can add really quickly too, I mean, when you're talking about adding these conditions for water rights, not only is it difficult with respect to agencies like Placer County Water Agency that obviously need to make sure that they protect their rights and continue their rights into the future, but when we're talking about projects like Sites Reservoir, that could conceivably make that project infeasible at that point, because if they hit that roadblock, it pretty much can kill a project. So there's some big repercussions when you start to tinker around with water rights, as you know.
Yes.
Yep.
One more question. So on this data here,
Yeah.
is that I mean, I've been a boater on Folsom Lake, and so this just almost appears to be just reflective of a new way of managing the level. And I know last year, and I'm a skier too.
Yeah.
And I know it wasn't the best snow year. It wasn't that great. And this curve looks really high. It's almost like they just kept it in during the summer, but now, like you said, they're going to work it back down to 250,000.
Yeah. So if I was to put myself in reclamation's operator's shoes, I think what they were trying to be very cognizant of is that we're in a back-to-back multi-year drought. I think that they were very, very mindful and very strategic about hydrology and really what they were seeing. And, I think in this particular water year, they really did take a conservative approach just to, I think, minimize risk to the system based on hydrology. I mean, if you look back at, January through March, I mean, it was very apparent that, having 3 months of really no measurable precipitation, that's obviously reason for concern. So I think, I would characterize the current operators and sort of the leadership at Reclamation. I think they're being very, from my perspective, being very prudent based on where we're at relative to the drought. If I was in their shoes, I'd probably be doing the same thing. However, they run into these times of years where, temperature requirements kick in. They're trying to manage Bay Delta because of, salinity issues, things like that. And so they'll do everything they can to try to bring up the reservoir as much as they possibly can without getting into that flood control space, and then try to, kind of glide it in as much as they can. So is it perfect? No, but I think certainly, I think that's the perspective and the approach that they're trying to bring this year, or have brought this year to the reservoir, for Folsom at least.
And then maybe, so what I thought I used to hear is that they used to kind of pick on or beat up on Folsom, whereas they had Shasta and others. So maybe now they're drawing from those a little bit more to, keep the salinity levels where they're at and that kind of thing, or?
I think it was just a function, just again, from my perspective, I think it was a function of just seeing the deterioration of Shasta. I think that was very eye-opening in terms of where the level was, the lake level for Shasta was. And I think that they saw, the hydrology in our region, in our watershed was actually pretty decent.
Better.
So I think they saw that as an opportunity to hopefully get them through this year. But, all things said, like I said, if precipitation doesn't work out the way we hope it does, it'll be an interesting year next year for sure from a system-wide standpoint.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments on this item?
Quick questions, kind of peripheral. A guy cut me off today in traffic with a "Stop the Tunnels" bumper sticker. Are the tunnels still on the table, and do they impact us at some point?
So to answer the question, yes. What's interesting is the tunnels project has been recast and sort of rebranded under different names. It's currently cast as the Delta Conveyance Project, or DCP. There has been a recent effort to sort of reboot the project by the Department of Water Resources. Historically, how Roseville has approached it from a position standpoint is a couple things. So we've been consistently over many years have been insistent upon the beneficiary pays principle. So there should be no attempt to try to cast costs for that project on folks that don't actually receive benefit from the project. The other thing is we're very keenly focused on sort of how a Delta Tunnels project, once constructed, based on an integrated system, what potential impacts that could have on Folsom Reservoir. So we're very interested in understanding the modeling, understanding the operational plan that they propose, things like that. And so that's historically been sort of our approach on the Delta Conveyance project and sort of the predecessors. Do we have a hard and fast oppose or support? We're not really there. We're just really trying to make sure we protect our interests as that project's being contemplated. But I'll say this, that there are, as an example, Sacramento County has a very strong opposition to that project has historically. And really the reason why is because they actually see physical impacts of the project, right? You're digging tunnels, you're installing other infrastructure to make that project work. So anyway, I think generally speaking, that's kind of the space that Roseville's been and we will probably remain in, with this project. And again, paying very, very close attention to the project as details come forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Is there anyone from the public who'd like to come forward and address the commission on this item? Seeing no public comment, I want to thank you for your update, Sean. I'd like to move to the next item, which is the Environmental Utilities Water Utility Division Overview. This report is also by Sean Bigley.
All right, well, thanks again, Chair Webb and members of the Public Utilities Commission. Again, Sean Bigley, Assistant Director for the Water Utility. So if we can go to the next slide, please. All right, so tonight what I want to do is I want to go ahead and provide you with an overview of the water utility. So again, I appreciate this opportunity to talk about the water utility and the folks behind the water utility that provide service to the city of Roseville. And so in terms of this presentation, there's really kind of four key elements to the presentation tonight. First is just an utility overview. Second, I want to talk a little bit about strategy and priorities within the water utility. Thirdly, I want to talk about projects, programs, and initiatives that we're currently engaged in the water utility. And finally, I want to talk about the people that make the water utility run. All right, so a little bit about our water supply in Roseville. So as I just talked about in the previous presentation, we have several sources of surface water. The first is our Central Valley Project surface water supply. That's about 32,000 acre feet of water. Again, that's through a water service contract, which the city of Roseville signed in 1971. Initially, it was a 40-year contract. In 2020, we were able to convert that contract to an indefinite term repayment contract. The second is our Placer County Water Agency Middle Fork Project supply. So that eventually will allow the city of Roseville to access up to 30,000 acre feet of water. Again, this is surface water that comes from the Placer County Water Agency Middle Fork Project. That project was basically developed and financed during the 1960s. It was an initiative that voters were able to vote on with respect to financing the project, and ultimately the project was completed in the 1960s. Finally, we have a smaller water service contract with San Juan Water District for 4,000 acre feet. That's essentially Middle Fork Project water from PCWA that San Juan Water District provides to the city of Roseville. It's essentially kind of remarketed, if you will, for lack of a better term, water. So in total, its total surface water supply is 66,000 acre feet of water. That 66,000 acre feet of surface water is there to basically provide the water for full build out of the city. And currently we're roughly using about 30,000 acre feet of surface water each year. In addition, we're focused on a diverse water supply. So we have 5 ASR wells in our system right now. We have more wells that are planned or under construction. We have 2 on the west side of town that are very close to completion. So those are looking to be probably completed by the end of this year. And again, those are in West Roseville. And then we're already starting to look at the next 2 wells where we already have locations and monitoring well facilities located. So we're looking to add 6 additional ASR wells over time. The system has 47,000 potable water connections. Roughly from a revenue standpoint, we're about $39.6 million. Expenses about $37.2 million. So next slide, please. So organizationally, we're basically set up in 6 different sections. So the water utility is part of the Environmental Utilities Department. We're a division within that department. And there's really 6 key sections within the utility. First is our Barton Road Water Treatment Plant, which is located in Granite Bay. That's our solo water treatment plant that treats water and delivers it to the city of Roseville. And many of the commissioners, or several of the commissioners here, have actually been on a tour of the facility, so you've seen it live. The next section is our water distribution group. That's our largest group. Essentially, these are the folks that maintain a lot of our infrastructure with respect to pipes and grounds, ASR wells, pump stations, tanks, you name it, they're there. They're maintaining it and operating those systems, repairing those systems. They also are engaged in rehabilitation. We have the small but mighty government relations section. That's Noel Maddock as one of our sections. And obviously, we're very engaged in terms of making sure we're protecting Roseville's interests, both in the legislative and regulatory realms. And this function actually serves the entire department. So Noel covers not only water, but also wastewater, solid waste, and other related issues that are important to environmental utilities in the city. We have a water efficiency section that focuses in on all things water efficiency, from enforcement of water efficiency regulations to offering rebates, programs, water-wise house calls, et cetera, and helping our customers become more water efficient over time. We have a small engineering hydrogeology group, focuses in on water planning, engineering projects, as well as a hydrogeology function. Because we have an ASR program that's fairly robust and growing, we do have a staff hydrogeologist that actually helps to maintain that program and advance that program over time. And finally, we have a customer service group that works with our customers to meet the service needs that are out there. More just on infrastructure, we have a 100 million gallon per day water treatment plant. We maintain 688 miles of water main, 5,334 hydrants in our system. We have 8 water tanks that equal to about 48 million gallons of water storage. We manage, again, our active groundwater well program. Again, talked about our 5 ASR wells, and right now the current well capacity is about 14.6 million gallons per day. For perspective in our system, typical summer demand, about right now, we're kind of hitting the peak. We're about 50 MGD typically, but that does vary. And it does also vary based on conservation requirements relative to irrigation, just to let you guys know. And then typical water demand hovers around 12 MGD in the system. All right, so switching to strategy and priorities. And so I provided today for each of the commissioners, we have our strategic plan. And so I want to talk a little bit about why this strategic plan is important and probably somewhat unique. So in 2021, our water leadership team, with input from our staff, developed a 4-year strategic plan that reaffirmed our mission, vision, and core values, as well as establishing 5 key goals, 15 related strategies, and 76 tactics to help focus and guide activities within the utility. So the 5 goals that are embedded in the strategic plan are water resource adequacy, infrastructure stability, customer satisfaction, investing in our team, and community and partner engagement. So what are the commitments that I personally made in terms of developing a strategic plan? And I've seen this over my career, is strategic plans that get created and then they get promptly put on a shelf and collect dust. And as a manager and as a leader in the organization, I kind of simply refused to do that. I wasn't going to repeat what I saw in the past. And so my personal commitment is actually to take the strategic plan and put it into action and create it as a tool, basically, to ensure accountability for our ratepayers ultimately. So again, each of the managers, again, including myself, are assigned and is accountable for performance and progress on the 15 strategies and the related tactics. So to do that, we meet quarterly, and in fact, we actually did our quarterly review today, where we evaluate progress, and we use a robust tracking tool called Strategy Blocks to track performance in the utility. So in the image here you see in the presentation, this is actually a sample of one of the Strategy Blocks dashboard views we use to track performance on an active basis. This is, of course, backed by data and is used to measure progress against specific metrics. So we're fairly early in this process, but we're really beginning to develop a good process, and ultimately our intent is to start to put out regular updates in terms of how we're measuring up against these various goals. So again, given our duty to provide water service reliably and in a cost-effective manner, the strategic plan has allowed us to maintain focus on specific goals and develop a mechanism to demonstrate progress in a consistent and transparent way. So next, we'll move on to projects, programs, and initiatives. So again, I just want to go through some of the key projects. And again, this is by no means exhaustive, so this will be just a quick overview. So on the books for nearly 20 years, we had the West Side Tank and Pump Station project. The construction of this project began in 2021. It consists of two 6 million gallon tanks and a pump station. And these facilities are now completed and are operational as of last month. And the contractor is wrapping up some final work like grading and paving of the site. The final part of the project is construction of a 3,000 square foot combined field office and shop. Design of that facility is nearly complete, and we anticipate the building will be constructed and in operation by next summer. At that point, we will do a grand opening of that facility, and you all will be receiving an invitation when we do that grand opening. Next project is a series of projects is our aquifer storage and recovery wells. So we're continuing to advance our aquifer storage and recovery program, and that includes active capital projects to add more ASR wells into our system. So again, as I mentioned before, late this year, we anticipate that 2 new ASR wells in West Roseville will come online. We are also beginning design on the next 2 ASR wells, which will be located in the Misty Woods and Campus Oaks areas. We anticipate those wells to be completed in late 2024, early 2025. From there, we have 2 more ASR wells that we are planning, one in East Roseville near Marlin Drive, and the other off of Pleasant Grove Boulevard, with likely completion around 2027. The ASR program continues to be a key element of the long-term diversification of Roseville's water supply. Another key initiative that we've undertaken in the water utility is focused on rehabilitation of water infrastructure in Roseville's older core neighborhoods. Time before road resurfacing by the Public Works Department, we take the opportunity to rehabilitate water mains, replace older wharf hydrants, and make service line improvements on our side of the system. We finished such work in the Hillcrest neighborhood earlier this year and are beginning design for a similar rehabilitation effort in the Roseville Heights neighborhood this year, with construction in that neighborhood scheduled for 2024. After that, we will move on to another core neighborhood, which we're currently determining for likely work in the 2026 timeframe. On a larger scale, we're working with our regional partners to find alternative access to currently available water supplies to develop redundancy and reduce risk related to bringing our surface water supplies through a single intake at Folsom Reservoir. So working with the City of Folsom and San Juan Water District, we are undergoing a technical study on looking at improvements at or near Folsom Dam that would create redundant intake structures that would reduce the risk of a potential dead pool scenario if that were to happen. At the conclusion of the study, working with the Bureau of Reclamation, we will evaluate next steps, and if a specific project becomes apparent and feasible, we would then advocate for those improvements to be made. The next set of projects is actually working in partnership with the Placer County Water Agency. On the more immediate term, we're working on joint improvements on the treated water side of PCWA system that include intertie improvements, increasing delivery capacity within PCWA system, and other improvements that are mutually beneficial to both Roseville and PCWA. On a much longer-term basis, we're developing a 3-phase raw water pipeline project that would effectively connect to our PCWA Middle Fork project supplies upstream of Folsom Reservoir with a connection to Roseville's Barton Road Water Treatment Plant. The project will likely be a joint project with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Roseville, and PCWA, with an initial $75,000 federal appropriation to pay for U.S. Army Corps of Engineers staff time. We have currently a pending $21 million congressional authorization in the Water Resources Development Act bill that's currently making its way through Congress. coupled with an initial congressional appropriation that will likely, and we'll see how Congress acts on this, likely be in the $4 to $5 million range. This project is estimated to cost $74 million. And in the case of federal funding, we're looking at a 25% local to a 75% federal cost split. We anticipate that all three phases of the project would likely be completed in the early 2030s. Staff is currently reviewing a proposed project agreement with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and hope to start design, environmental, and other pre-work in 2023. So we have many more projects, programs, and initiatives in the water utility. Briefly, active rehabilitation of vertical infrastructure assets such as our Button Road Water Treatment Plant. We're also doing active rehabilitation every 6 years on our ASR wells. In fact, we just finished up rehabilitation on our ASR wells, prepare for next year. And we're completing that, again, just to prepare for another potential year of drought. We also have an active leak detection program that uses both simple sounding tools, but we're also now leveraging technology such as cellular sounding equipment, as well as satellite flyover scans to proactively detect system leaks and more efficiently dispatch repair crews. Finally, the water utility has a robust water efficiency program that focuses on water efficiency programs and rebates for our customers, water waste patrols and enforcement, water efficient landscape ordinance plan checks and verification, and other demand management efforts. The last part of the presentation, I want to focus on people. So in my view, the most important aspect of the operation are the people that keep all of this running. So I am humbled by the professionalism, dedication, and pride that the water utility staff have in serving the community of Roseville. We are guided in the division by 5 core values: teamwork, competence, respect, leadership, and integrity. It's not just something we hang on a wall. We actively work to incorporate these core values in how we do our work. Many focused discussions and team building activities happen around how we can live our core values every day. At the end of the day, myself and the water leadership team work very hard to maintain a focused, culture-driven by these core values. And in my view, better performance, essentially adherence to these core values could equal better performance and superior customer service experience by focusing in on these areas. So I think it comes down just simply to this, that focused and happy employees translate into much higher levels of sustained customer service satisfaction in my view. So with that, this concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
The commissioners have questions for our staff right now? Yes.
Where can residents find a list of the current rebates that the city offers?
So we've got actually a pretty robust water efficiency page. I think it's www.roseville.ca.us/save water. Mm-hmm. And that'll take you right there. And then there's also the navigation. If you do click on water efficiency, it'll take you to that page and has everything kind of laid out in one page.
It was well done.
Yes.
Do the commissioners have any other questions? I'd like to check to see if there's anyone from the public who'd like to come forward and address the commission at this time. Not seeing any public comment. Thank you so much, Sean.
Sure, thank you.
I'd like to move to the next agenda item. This is the Environmental Utilities Legislative and Regulatory Update. We get this presentation from Environmental Utilities Utility Government Relations Administrator Noel Maddock with legislative and regulatory updates for information. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Webb and Vice Chair Knox and Commissioners. It's been a little while since I've been here. Very happy to be back. I'm really excited to follow Sean's great presentation. I hope I can stand up next to him. Tonight, I'm going to be covering several state and federal legislative and regulatory items, and I've broken down my presentation into 4 slides. The first 3 slides are state items broken down into bills that we're currently supporting, followed by bills that we're opposed to, followed by state regulatory items, and then our last slide is on federal items.
Do we have these? Do we have hard copies?
They're not in your
I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry, you guys.
That's all right. We have this. We have them right here.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
That was my fault. I'm sorry.
I will go ahead and start off by highlighting AB 2142, which is being sponsored by the Association of California Water Agencies. If signed into law, customers participating in turf conversion rebate programs between January 1st of 2022 and January 1st of 2027 would not be taxed on the benefit amount that they receive. We are supporting this measure as it would benefit our customers participating in Roseville's Cash for Grass program and hopefully make it a little bit more appealing to participate in that program. The next measure is AB 2247, which does two things. First, it would create a statewide database of products and product components that contain per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, commonly referred to as PFAS. Second, it would require a manufacturer to begin registering their product on that new database beginning July 1st of 2025 if the product that or component has intentionally added PFAS within it and is intended to be sold or distributed in California. Roseville is supporting this measure to help the state gain a better understanding of these types of products that contain PFAS substances. This is important to the Environmental Utilities Department, as both water and wastewater agencies are often relied upon to treat for these man-made substances, and we do not have any control over how they enter into our systems. And ultimately, our customers end up having to pay higher rates for that treatment. So knowing who and what products are responsible for introducing these substances into our environment is the first step in ensuring that the manufacturers will be held responsible for the proper cleanup and disposal versus placing the responsibility upon our ratepayers. The next two measures are being sponsored by the California Product Stewardship Council, of which we're a member of, and are consistent with the City of Roseville's Council Resolution 10278, which is on extended producer responsibility. AB 2440 would require producers of lithium-ion batteries to establish a stewardship program for the collection and recycling of their batteries. Roseville has been participating in a coalition in support of this measure due to the safety concerns these batteries pose to our drivers, equipment, and community members when improperly disposed of. The next measure, SB 1215, was previously a part of 2440. This measure is actually addressing embedded batteries within products. And what they've decided to do is split the two bills apart, and now they're expanding and extending current laws and regulations to include all devices with embedded batteries in the current recycling program. We feel this is a more efficient way of addressing this particular issue. So we are in support of that measure as well. Moving on to the really fun bills. These bills we are currently have an oppose unless amended on. The first measure is AB 1931. It is Roseville's top priority to provide customers with safe, reliable, and affordable water. However, as this measure was amended in March, it conflicted with state laws and regulations and newly updated federal lead and copper rule. Specifically, it would have required water agencies to re-inventory lead service lines in our jurisdictions for a third time and take on the liability and costs of replacing lead lines on the customer side of the meter. The measure was subsequently amended on June 30th to address the duplication in the new updated federal lead and copper rule, and trying to address the concerns that were expressed that it violated Prop 218. 1931 Now focuses on three elements: taking advantage of $15 billion in federal funding for lead service line and galvanized line replacements, setting a higher bar for the allowance of partial lead service line replacements, and allowing for a narrow exemption for emergency lead service line repairs. While the measure is vastly improved, a number of concerns remain. As part of that high bar, water agencies will not be required to pay for the work on the customer side of the meter. However, agencies like Roseville would still be required to seek federal funding from the state to pay for replacement of the customer's line, causing delays. And there is no guarantee that an agency would receive funding, as the state and federal funding is supposed to go to disadvantaged communities first. Additionally, it still requires us to perform the work on private property, increasing an agency's liability exposure. The next measure is SB 222, which, as I mentioned before, has been taking up a lot of my time recently. This measure, as Roseville as well as the water industry worked on last year, we were all able to get to a support position or a neutral position on this bill. Prior to the author pulling the bill to work on amendments with the administration. It was just prior to the summer recess that the amendments were released. The amendments are actually so bad that Roseville and all of our associations have changed our position to an oppose unless amended. The new bill places water agencies in an untenable situation or position of either violating the new law or being in violation of the Constitution via Proposition 218. And if we failed to participate in this program, we would face the Attorney General having the ability to prosecute us, or the State Water Board would classify us as an at-risk system, halting our ability to receive any state funding, and down the road be under the threat of them having the ability to take over our system. So staff has been working overtime on this measure, and we have gotten our associations to work towards getting amendments that would make it like the low-income household water payment program that was instituted last year, and I'll be talking about a little bit more later. It's a far more efficient, where the customers are qualified by a third party, and then the funding would come directly to the water agency on their behalf. So we feel that kind of a delivery model would be far more efficient than requiring each local water agency to have a program of their own. Staff has met with the sponsors of the bill, along with some other water agencies and the Regional Water Authority. The conversation was very eye-opening. One, they don't understand how these programs actually operate in real life. So they were very open to requiring that third-party entity to run the program. But it's still, we're still unsure about it. And probably the biggest issue with the bill at this point is they're currently seeking $330 million in the state budget from the drought funding that's still working its way through the legislative process. And that money would be used for the first 2 years of startup and implementing the program, but there is no long-term funding source for that program at this time. So the next measure is SB 1124, which would require the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment to establish a public health goal for manganese by July 1st of 2025. And it would require the State Water Resources Control Board to adopt a primary drinking water standard and establish monitoring requirements. until the State Water Board adopts the primary drinking water standard, they would be forced to establish a notification or response level by January 21st of 2024. The reason why we're concerned about this is the precedent that this measure sets by disregarding the scientific regulatory processes that the State Board and OEHA are already mandated to perform. It presupposes that the science regarding manganese health impacts is complete and circumvents the rigorous scientific process. The last measure is the one that Einar had asked about previously, which is SB 1157, which poses to establish new indoor water use standard of 47 gallons per capita daily in 2025, and then reduce that to 42 gallons per capita daily in 2030. This bill is a follow-up to the conservation legislation adopted in 2018 that required the Department of Water Resources to study the ability to reduce indoor water use and at what cost to water agencies and wastewater and recycled water systems. In November, DWR released the report, and while the report actually suggests agency can get to these ultra-low indoor numbers, from our perspective, there were several flaws in the study. The study ended just prior to COVID-19 pandemic, and it does not fully contemplate the shift of working from home that we've all seen, and now seems to be something that is a benefit that employees are wanting and looking for going forward. So a fundamental shift to that remote working situation. Additionally, the study acknowledged the impacts to water and recycled water utilities, but it failed to study the costs of those systems to adapt to the new lower flows. To get to kind of what Roseville has been working on this measure and how engaged we are, Roseville was asked to provide co-lead testimony with the Association of California Water Agencies while it was in the Senate. They focused mostly on the water impacts, and what I provided testimony on was on the wastewater and recycled water impacts. So we're actively engaged in this process and letting the legislature know exactly the impacts that it will have on our systems as well as our ratepayers. The bill was recently amended, but did not address the 2030 number. So we're continuing to work through our statewide and regional associations to address that specific issue, and we've crafted an amendment that has been put forth to the bill author as well as the sponsors, which would require an additional study to look at the shift in to the more remote teleworking situation that we're seeing going forward. In initial base studies that have been done, there was a 3 to 12 GPCD difference when they looked at it just after COVID came into play. So it wasn't fully studied. So there's a big gap to have an understanding. And so that would make a big difference on that 47 number as well as that 42 number moving forward. So I'll talk about something that's a little bit better from our perspective, which is the Low-Income Household Water Assistance Program. Roseville is excited that we have been able to participate in this program. Back in October, I provided the commission a briefing on this new temporary program that was created to provide income-eligible customers relief from past due water and wastewater bills. As a reminder, income-eligible customers will be able to receive up to $2,000 to pay down any past due and current bills. There was another program that was just during the COVID time period. This one extends beyond that. Our utility department has already enrolled in the program, and staff has worked with Project Go, which will be the implementer of this program. And we have provided information to our customers. It went out in one of our recent newsletters to make them aware that they have this ability to participate should they need. So that one was pretty exciting. The last regulatory item is an update on the establishment of a maximum contaminant level, MCL, for hexavalent chromium, Chrome 6. In late March, the State Water Resources Control Board's Division of Drinking Water posted a new administrative draft for an MCL for Chrome 6. The original MCL was set at 10 micrograms per liter, which was later overturned by the Sacramento Superior Court in 2017. The court did not make a determination on whether the MCL was economically feasible. What they merely found was that the department did not adequately document why the MCL was economically feasible. So fast forward to 2022, and Water Board staff is not proposing a new MCL level. It is moving forward with the 10 micrograms per liter and proposing a reporting limit of 0.05 micrograms per liter. As a side issue to this, there is a desire by water agencies to have time to come into compliance after any new MCL takes effect. Historically, compliance timelines have not been issued when an MCL has been issued. This means a water agency could effectively be out of compliance as soon as the MCL takes effect. So over the past few years, there have been legislative attempts, including this year, to require timelines for implementation to be included, which the bills have stalled because now the State Water Resource Control Board believes that they do have the authority to establish these compliance timelines, and they have issued their very first one with the Chrome 6 MCL proposed. So for systems like Roseville, serving a population of 10,000 or more, we would have 2 years after the regulation takes effect to come into compliance. We've heard from internally as well as externally, the compliance timelines are still really tight, and we are hoping that we're going to be able to engage to get those extended a little, give us a little bit more time to come into compliance. And this is especially important because now they've asserted they have the ability to set these timelines on a go-forward basis. And so with any new MCL that they set, we anticipate them also providing these timelines. This being the first one, we think it's going to be kind of the precedent-setting one, and they'll follow suit on any future ones. Last are our federal updates on legislation. The last two bills I will be covering are Senate Bills 3956 and 4279, both of which are being co-authored by Senator Padilla, who is also a former state assembly and Senate member from California. SB 3956 is the Wastewater Infrastructure Pollution Prevention and Environmental Safety Act. I had to say that because it's really being referred to as the WIPES Act. This bill actually is very similar to AB 818 by Assemblymember Bloom from last year, which addressed disposable wipes that get improperly disposed of in the wastewater systems. So specifically, 3956, it requires the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to issue regulations on do not flush labeling requirements for items such as baby wipes, household wipes, disinfecting, and personal care wipes that do not meet biodegradability requirements. Additionally, the legislation provides funding to support increased awareness at the state and local level of the label and proper disposal methods. And Roseville recently sent a support letter to Senator Padilla on that measure. The next measure is Senate Bill 4279, which seeks to provide federal assistance to do the following: promote the adoption of water conservation technologies within both the municipal and agricultural sectors, assist the ability of water systems to identify leaks and correct audit findings, and support the ability of local agencies to modernize plumbing codes. Sean spoke a little bit about it, but in 2019, Roseville began a leak detection program to proactively inspect 60 miles of main lines, service lines, valves, hydrants, blow-offs, and air release valves annually. Once a leak is found, it is repaired, and to date, Roseville has saved well over 12 million gallons of water on an annual basis. Roseville is supporting this legislation for the potential funding for our leak detection program. The last item Sean spoke to about a little bit earlier, and I'll expand a little bit on it, and that is our project that we are doing in partnership with the Placer County Water Agency, which is the Alternative Conveyance Project to ensure a more reliable water future for Roseville residents. For the last 2 years, Roseville and PCWA have submitted federal requests for member-directed funding. Last year, Senator Padilla was able to secure a $75,000 appropriation that is being used to develop a project agreement with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, which could provide us with up to a 75% cost share. Additionally, Senator Padilla submitted a $21 million authorization as part of the federal 2022 Water Resources and Development Act, which Sean kind of covered. The House has also passed their version of it, so now those two bills are in reconciliation. And both Senators Feinstein and Padilla, as Sean mentioned, have also included appropriations requests for that project as well. That concludes my presentation. If you have any questions for me.
Questions from this side?
Lots. Are these all 2-year bills or not?
SB 222 is a 2-year bill. It's one that we worked on last year. Majority of those bills were all introduced since January of this year. But we're in the second year of a 2-year cycle.
Okay. I did Cash for Grass 7 years ago, and I don't remember a 1098 or 1099. Did you just not do that, or did why all of a sudden now is it considered? Why all of a sudden, I guess, is a refund considered? Well, I guess refunds are income, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So has something happened that now this suddenly is an issue, or is it just housekeeping? It's all right.
I'm not sure what exactly brought the issue to light. I know that there was a lot of discussion when it came to the funding that we received from the federal government to help provide relief for folks that were behind on their bills.
No, that's two. Yeah, two different things.
Yeah, it's two totally different things.
Yeah.
But that's where this issue really came about.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so it was highlighted that funding that a customer's receiving is a taxable.
considered,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
okay,
considered to
sure.
be a taxable income, and so we had to fight to
I
make
don't
sure
mean
that
gotcha,
those.
but I
No,
understand
yeah.
what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, and so when we were looking at all of these programs that we're doing, we thought the cash for grass, there's a $599. So if you go over $600 threshold, that's really when it's reported.
Okay.
So when you're looking at these higher sums,
Yeah, 'cause I know
that's when
it was
it's-
$1
yeah.
square foot out of 1,000 square feet of lawn.
Yeah.
And so I got a check for $1,000. Yeah. Okay. I get PFAs and PABAs confused. Aren't what's in a plastic bottle? Is that a PABA or is that a PF? I'm really confused on that legislation because that sounds like really almost draconian to try to enforce and put on a manufacturer to, report that.
So PFAS is associated with more like the Teflon
Okay.
and like fabric that's wicking and things like that. That's really what PFAS are really associated with. They have new names for the chemicals as they're being created. And so they're calling a lot of them now like next gen chemicals.
So I've seen that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And I'll try to wrap. Manganese, isn't there already a standard for manganese in the water? And that just kind of hit me.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's currently a secondary standard. And so the concern is, and I'll just give you an example. So wells, I won't use numbers, the two new wells in West Roseville, and this is actually naturally occurring especially in the west side of town. There is manganese actually in the certain areas of the aquifer, and so these two new wells, when we drilled the monitoring wells, we actually did have elevated levels of manganese, but again, manganese is a secondary level, so it's more of an aesthetic impact. And so, we have to actually install additional treatment facilities, especially green sand filters, essentially to really draw out that manganese before it's served to customers. So, when we're talking about starting to tinker around with manganese and public health goals and things like that, Roseville especially needs to pay close attention to that because it is naturally occurring on the west side of town, and it could impact, sort of future development of groundwater wells in that part of town. So that's why we're really paying very, very close attention.
Okay, I did have one more. Embedded batteries. So I have my grandkids' toys have those batteries that you have to unscrew to get to them, but I can just see those going into the trash, right? That's the issue, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So how do you get around that? Make it so all of them have to have a little snap thing that opens, or
No, they're going to be adding those into the electronic
disposal
stream.
Okay.
So they will be recycled. So instead of having to pull them out
Okay.
and being loose, that they would be able to throw away the product.
Okay. Got it. Okay. Thank you for your patience. I really appreciate
Absolutely. It's amazing what I get to learn.
Hey, the rebate program's great. I put in artificial lawns, and that was a nice rebate about a year and a half ago. Good program.
So, any other questions on this side? Over here? Yes, of course.
Sorry I got out of sequence.
It's okay.
My apologies, Noel. So the battery, just a few of them. The battery recycling, is that like the tip of the iceberg for how automobile, electric car batteries are going to?
That's a really
Is this-
good question, Einar.
Is this coming? Is this coming home to roost, so to speak?
Actually, the prevalence of the lithium-ion batteries in the waste stream, a lot of people are throwing them away in the garbage, and they have the tendency to spark and cause fires, which we have experienced. There was a bill that was introduced this year to deal with the car batteries. However, they already have a process for disposal of car batteries, which is different than the loose or the embedded.
Yeah.
So stay tuned there will be legislation on that in the future.
So 1157, is the current indoor requirement still 75 gallons per capita per day?
55.
Oh, it's 55. So this would be, oh, all right, okay. And our we have wells that are over the new Chrome 6 requirement?
No. There is natural occurring Chrome 6 in wells in Placer County, but not our wells within city limits.
All right, so we're not directly affected.
No, at this point in time, we're not anticipating
10
issues.
10 parts per billion is just,
Yeah.
do they have good scientific documentation that that's really a public health threat at that level? Or is it somewhat arbitrary?
Probably.
I believe it's along the lines of, with lead, they're viewing it as there's no exposure level that's good. So
this is the smallest we can measure, and so that's what we set the standard at, kind of thing?
I'm not even confident that they can measure that low from my understanding. But we do have time. It was a draft. So it isn't in place. So we will be commenting on that.
Well, I agree with all your recommendations to oppose, I can tell you that. Good job.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commissioner? Do we have any interest in public comment on this item? Not hearing any public comment, I want to thank you, Noel, for your presentation. Our next item is the Roseville Electric Utility Monthly Update. This report is being given to us by the Electric Utility Director, Dan Beans, summarizing the monthly status of the electric utilities activities. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. So this will be very brief. The issues that are top of mind right now are the same ones we've had the last few months. The number one issue is transformer supply chain issues. And as I reported out before, we've been active in DC trying to bring awareness to legislators and regulators of the issue and the impact. I'm also serving on a national task force, and we meet every Friday via Teams. We do that in conjunction with the Department of Energy. Right now, we're developing surveys for manufacturers to find out exactly what is holding them up. So far, it sounds like there's three main issues that I've heard, and that's, of course, the steel, also aluminum, and labor. But we're going to get down to the bottom of it, and it looks like the manufacturers are going to, participate in that survey. DOE is going to put the survey out for us. We also, on a good note, we did find some foreign transformers out of South Korea, another manufacturer, and so our normal spec requires domestic only, but we have to have transformers. We lost 2 in the last 2 weeks, one from a car, one from just natural causes. We haven't had a transformer delivery this year, so we need to get them where we can find them, and so thankfully we have that. With any luck, we might have some by the end of this year from South Korea. So meanwhile, we're still waiting to hear from our domestic manufacturer when our other orders will come in. So we're just trying to keep the lights on one transformer at a time. We're working with our North State BIA, and they're the ones who got me in contact with the National Association of Home Builders in DC. And when I went and met them during their ledge rally, they continued carrying our message, and we'd made some brochures on the impact of the transformer issue to Roseville. And they talked to the White House and Department of Commerce, and so I have a call with the Commerce Department on Monday. They want to understand what this is, what's happening in Roseville and the impact. So hopefully we can get some more
interest and keep raising the elevation and the issue. Any questions on the transformer?
I think you mentioned in a past presentation the source of steel was Russia. What is so special about that steel?
Well, some of it comes from Russia and Ukraine, but a lot of our steel that we need domestically is imported. Too much of it, apparently. And the other issue is the kind of steel they need is grain-oriented steel. It's special steel. As the Department of Energy continues to raise the efficiency standards for transformers, it makes that steel even more rare, harder to make and to get. And the steel is in competition with the steel they use with electric vehicle motors. And so this issue with steel scarcity is not transitory. This is going to get worse. And so we need somebody at a federal level really watching this and kind of herding the cats on making sure that all of these policy goals can be met by making sure we have natural resources or the resources we need to do. Yeah.
So, isn't there a lot of federal money going into electrical vehicle charging stations throughout the entire country, all of which need transformers?
Yes. That's part of my speech. Yeah, I mean, this affects housing, this affects greenhouse gas emissions, this affects transportation electrification. Yeah, you can't get there. And I mean, they need the steel for military reasons too. So, I mean, this is a big issue. Hopefully we can get it solved. I mean, Roseville's growing so fast compared to other cities that it really hurts us more because, we don't want to slow down our growth. So,
I mean, I thought it's not just a Roseville problem, it's a U.S., probably Canada, everywhere problem, right?
It is. It's national. Right now, American Public Power has done some surveys of national public utilities, and the other talking points that I share is one that they came up with, and that is if there's one hurricane this year, we probably have enough transformers to get those people back in power. If there's two, no guarantee. And the odds of having more than one in this day and age is pretty good. So that's how scarce these things are.
So do you think the specs will change, or do you think can another material be used, like carbon or something?
Yeah, so APPA and sent a letter to DOE asking them to relax the standard, but that's one of the questions on the survey. We're going to ask the manufacturers, reducing the standard, will that help you? Does that give you more capacity or ability to get more material? So we're asking a lot of those questions, and we'll see what we can do.
When's the survey going to get returned?
It hasn't gone out yet. There was a comment, government can only work so fast or something like that. And so we're moving along. We've been working on the survey now for 2 or 3 weeks, I think. So I think it'll maybe go out next week, and then they'll have 10 days or so to respond. So anyway, we're making progress. We have a few smaller groups. So there's a small transformer group, which I wanted to be on, but they put me on the large transformer group, which is also an issue for utilities. So I'll be helping with that group too. So that's important.
And Dan, there were lots of steel companies in the U.S.
There were.
Massive amount. And a lot of them were shut down for environmental reasons, but also just because of competition. Steel from China, which is kind of shaky standards. I've dealt with it. Some's good, a lot of it's bad. But that's part of the problem, is there's been no incentive by steel companies to make big investments because of the heavy cost.
Yeah, exactly right. And the bummer part is in 2017, Department of Commerce did a study on this, and there was only one steel manufacturer left, AK Steel. It got bought out by Cleveland Cliffs, and that was the only one left in the United States producing this steel. And I believe the previous administration did do some tariffs and things to try to make sure there was some competition there, but we just need more capacity domestically.
Exactly.
We have to get back to those fundamental manufacturing and natural resources in our country so we can control it. And you can look at the news and see why. We can't leave our fate to somebody else.
Yep.
Well, I do know that the metal industry across the board has lifted the allocations to the different suppliers. Once the material is available, what's the turn time to actually have transformers built and ready to go?
I've heard the number of like once they release it for production, because they have all the materials, they can get it to us to our door in like 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really not a bad turnaround. It's just getting started.
Any other questions?
I had a couple more really quick things if you want to hear it.
Oh,
So
please go
just,
ahead. Yeah.
just to go on a really negative note, power supply costs are way up. Natural gas this month has gone up 77%. It's like 300% higher than it was a year ago. So more to come on that. The 2 peaker units that DWR put in, they're basically waiting for an air permit, and I think they'll be able to test them. So they're ready to go. Any other questions? That's pretty much all I had.
Other
Done well.
questions?
Good.
No?
Very done. Very well done.
The last thing you mentioned, that was at the Cal ISO peakers? That were,
Over at the Roseville Energy Park, the DWR peakers, yep.
Okay. I'd like to open this up for public comment. Seeing no public comment, I want to thank you for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I'm now opening this up for our next item, which is board member or commissioner staff reports. Do we have any reports from staff? Go ahead, from commission, yes.
I took the opportunity to visit the Roseville Energy Center. The amount of water treatment that goes on there was absolutely mind-boggling in order to make the zero liquid discharge system work. And anyway, that's kind of a side note, except it's really not a side note because the whole thing seems to be kind of dependent on it. Anyway, everything looked wonderful. I enjoyed the tour, and thank you very much to your staff for that.
Any other reports or comments from the commissioners?
I do. I will properly introduce or mention an article that appeared on the 22nd of this month. It was a Bloomberg article about what's called green hydrogen. And in our power plants in Roseville and elsewhere, a lot use, of course, natural gas, especially in California, to power plants. And it's the state's mandate that, such fossil fuels will be outlawed, within 10, 15 years? I forget the actual date. And it's a serious problem, and there's a lot of doubts to whether this can be done. This article that I'll make available, if anybody would like to read it, it talks about electrolysis, and electrolysis has been around for 200 years. It's an old technology, and in this sense, it would be used to convert natural gas, which we have as a fossil fuel now. Instead of using it as a fossil fuel, it can be broken down into pure hydrogen and pure carbon through an electrolysis process that combines heat with it. And it's right now it's just economically not feasible, but within maybe 5 to 10 years, it may well be. There are many, many companies, big companies, working on this process now. And just think of it, if we could take our natural gas source that comes to us and be able to convert it to pure natural gas and pure carbon, pure hydrogen and pure carbon, and we can dispose of the carbon easily, landfills, or there may be industrial uses for it, and then we could use the hydrogen as really the pure fuel. The only thing you get in the combustion of hydrogen is water vapor. And of course, you can collect water vapor too. So I mean, it can really have a significant effect, not just in California, but nationwide. If this could be done, and it will be someday. I mean, it's a breakthrough. Something to think about. I'll make this. And we talked about steel production earlier. Right now, the industry has been using a lot of coal. throughout the U.S. in coal plants. And some have converted to the use of hydrogen. Hydrogen burns a lot hotter than natural gas. That's one of the reasons why the steel industry likes to use it. But if the steel industry could likewise use natural gas and convert it to pure hydrogen, it's also a bonus, a step ahead towards reducing global warming, not just in California, but everywhere. So anyway, I'll make this article available. Maybe Pam, you can include it in our notes tonight, and the public can see it. Any of you can see it, and anyone else.
Thank you.
That's it.
Any other reports or comments from the commission? Does anyone have any items they would like to suggest for future meetings? Not seeing any items. I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
And second? Okay. All those in favor, please say
Aye.
all opposed. We are adjourned. Thank you.